Welcome to Chapter 13 of Prometheus Writing by Robert Anton Wilson. Chapter 13, Introduction to the Metaprogramming Circuit. It is the human situation that is basically tragic. Right and left revolutionaries cannot alter this basic dilemma. For instance, the most radical left-wing group has no program to overcome death. The entire right-left establishment is still death-oriented. Then there's a cartoon. Can 100,000 people hallucinate at once? How else do you explain history? I once saw a cartoon, I forget where, that seems to me to summarize the central fact of neurological relativism. A cat approaches a dog and says, meow. The dog looks confused. The cat repeats, meow. The dog still looks confused. The cat repeats more emphatically, meow. Finally, the dog ventures, bow wow. The cat stalks away indignantly, thinking, dumb dog. Of course, human communication and our great philosophical debates cannot be on this primitive level. Of course. Nonetheless, between May and October 1917, in Fatima, Spain, occurred the best documented series of miracles in modern history. As everybody knows, it began when 3 illiterate peasant girls had a vision of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Please note at once that it is easy and tempting for the rationalists and non-Catholic generally to treat this first incident as merely hallucination. Note next how hard it is to make that explanation stick as the subsequent details are narrated. At the second visitation of the Virgin in June, there were 50 witnesses. All agreed they had heard an explosion and saw a puff of smoke. Only the 3 girls on this and subsequent occasions ever saw the lady. Shall we assume now that in addition to hallucinating girls, we must add a practical joker with a smoke bomb to make sense of what was going on? The third visitation in July, there were 4,500 witnesses. All of them heard an explosion again at the lady's departure, and most of them claimed they heard humming and buzzing noises while the children spoke to her. This humming and buzzing is common in later UFO stories. On August 13th, there were 18,000 witnesses who saw or hallucinated a symphony of weirdities, including flowers falling out of the sky, another explosion, bright flashes of light on the clouds and ground, crimson, pink, yellow, and blue, and a luminous globe spinning through the sky just like a modern UFO. On December 13th, there were 30,000 witnesses. All saw the luminous UFO again, and there was another downpour, not flowers this time, but glistening globules of light that got smaller as they descended and melted near ground level. Dr. Carl Sagan would have solemnly told you, with his bare face hanging out, that all 30,000 witnesses were hallucinating simultaneously. October 13th, the last miracle was witnessed by 70,000 at the scene, and 30,000 others for hundreds of miles around claimed to see some of the phenomena. Some said that the sun plunged directly towards the earth, but others that a globe big and bright as the sun had appeared and did the plunging. This was accompanied by flashes of red, violet, blue, and yellow, together with a heavenly perfume permeating the air. It is claimed that thousands of people were converted to Catholicism by these events. Please note that if it had all happened 50 years later in 1967, many of these people would have been converted to the newer mystique of the Space Brothers. Nietzsche once said, "We are all greater artists than we realize." It is a function of the above record and this book as a whole to make sure that obscure joke totally clear to every reader. But, all 100,000 witnesses who saw some of the phenomena associated with the last Fatima miracle must have been hallucinating, of course. This is the most comfortable and conservative way of dealing with such events and does not have the same does not have to be as narrow as Dr. Sagan to prefer such a simple explanation. Still, if 100,000 people can hallucinate simultaneously, and if, as history assures us, many millions can share a religious or political delusion simultaneously, only a man as rigidly dogmatic as Sagan can avoid asking the most disturbing questions about the origin of his own beliefs and perceptions. Cromwell once addressed the Irish rebels, saying, "I beseech you, in the bowels of Christ, think it possible that you might be wrong." In the bowels of Christ. History does not record that Cromwell ever addressed the same remark to himself. Each of us is trapped in the reality tunnel assumption-consumption his or her brain has manufactured. We do not see it or sense it as a model our brain has created. We automatically, unconsciously, mechanically see and sense it out there, apart from us, and we consider it objective. When we meet somebody whose separate tunnel reality is obviously far different from ours, we are a bit frightened and always disoriented. We tend to think they are mad, or that they are crooks, trying to con us in some way, or that they are hoaxers playing a joke. Yet, it is neurologically obvious that no two brains have the same genetically programmed hardwiring, the same imprints, the same conditioning, the same learning experiences. We are all living in separate realities. That is why communication fails so often, and misunderstandings and resentments are so common. I say meow and you say bow wow, and each of us is convinced the other is a bit dumb. According to reliable statistics, over 100 million citizens of the U.S. believe in UFOs, and at least 15 million have seen a UFO. The system of ideas, rumors, myths, hopes, etc., clustered about UFO phenomena may be the most powerful sociological force for change currently acting upon our society, as Dr. Jacques Vallée recently stressed in an address to a special United Nations committee on the UFO mystery. The UFO debate or quarrel hinges upon the two categories which we find central to our thesis: the innocent-looking ideas of inside and outside. Broadly speaking, the UFO skeptics are those who claim UFO is inside, the UFO observer, hallucination, misidentification, etc., while the UFO believers claim the UFO is outside objectively. As the semanticist Alfred Korzybski often warned, when we split verbally that which is never split existentially, we introduce fallacies into our thinking. Korzybski's favorite example was the matter of space and time. For inexperience, we never encounter space without time or time without space. In other words, a year measures the space the Earth moves around the Sun, and the space the Earth travels in one orbit gives us the time we call a year. The verbal separation of space and time becomes such a problem in the late 19th century physics that paradoxes and contradictions multiplied endlessly. And this was only resolved when the genius of Einstein went back before the verbal categories realized we had created them and started physics over from the ground up on the simple existential fact that we never encounter space or time separately, but only in the undifferentiated space-time continuum. Applying this Einsteinian operational orientation to the UFO problem, we observe that we never hear of UFO without a human observer. In fact, even the UFOs seen on radar become UFOs, unidentified rather than identified flying objects, through process of evaluation in the nervous system of the radar operator. It is therefore the Einsteinian and operational approach to accept seamless unity of UFO observer and cease to separate them into UFO and observer. The types of critters who appear on human UFO experiences include the following: black men, blue men, green men, black-faced men with green bodies, fist-scaled men, hairy dwarves, huge-headed bald dwarves, armless humanoids, dwarves with 3 fingers, dwarves with 8 fingers, claw-handed men, one-eyed men, elephant-eared men, long-haired sexless women, Man apes, man birds, robots, beer can shaped entities walking on fins, headless things, dwarves in Nazi uniforms, sinister greys who engage in sexual and or genetic tampering with humans. This is only a partial zoology of the UFO experience. The craft favored by this odd crew includes big blobs of light, little blobs of light, clusters of lights, hard metallic ships, flat-bottomed discs, conic discs, coin-like discs, domed discs, ovals, spheres, spheroids, cigar-shaped craft, cubes, tetrahedrons, crescents, eggs, teardrop shapes, boomerangs. This is also a partial list. We are being invaded by beings from dozens of galaxies, said Otto Binder, a believer in extraterrestrial theory of UFOs, when this list was shown to him. One consistency does appear in this confusing picture. Those who have had close encounters show marked personality change afterwards. At one extreme, we find paranoid and schizophrenic breakdowns or acute anxieties requiring hospitalization. At the other, illuminations similar to those of Buddha. Muhammad, Jesus, St. Paul. In the middle, we find a great deal of messianic fanaticism, typical of vulgar religiosity everywhere. Other statistical clusterings can be found in the literature. Blinding lights are very common. Do we recall St. Paul and the thousands at Fatima? And drumming and humming noises are also common, as in shamanism everywhere at Fatima, and even in so sophisticated a brain change system as Tibetan Buddhism. Let nobody underestimate this phenomena just because it is irrational. It is equally irrational for 900 people to drink cyanide because a paranoid on pep pills tells them to, and Nazism and the Holy Inquisition were equally irrational. As Dr. Jacques Vallée told the UN committees on UFOs, it is the third aspect of the UFO phenomenon which deserves full attention. The third aspect is the social belief system which has been generated by the expectation of space victors. This belief is creating new religious, cultural, and political concepts of which social science has taken little notice. Rationalism, a philosophy for which we have great sympathy, as for a backward relative, wants to take UFO observers by the collar, shake them vigorously, and shout in their ears, "Look, you so-and-so, it never happened. You got it, buddy?" Well, maybe it didn't. And then again, maybe it did. In either case, UFO observers are all better artists than they realize. It should also be obvious that the rationalist is a better artist than he realizes. Amid millions of people who have or create such experiences every day in every city on the planet, the rationalist has created a separate reality in which things never happen to him. Flying saucers and ESP, not to mention Fatima and its miracles, may seem far removed from Patty Hearst's decision to become a bank robber. We are all trying to show that there is an intimate connection between all the weirdities of consciousness. And on the page before, there was Dr. Carl Jung has compared the UFOs in general and close encounters in particular with the signs and wonders that accompanied the breakdown of Roman paganism and the rise of Christianity. It is ironic to remember that the rationalists of the time, the Stoics, Epicureans, and other heirs of Greek philosophical skeptical traditions, regarded Christianity with as much contempt as the modern rationalist has for UFOs. They simply refused to look at what was happening until their society was overcome by the paradigm shift to the new reality. The process by which we construct a kitchen chair out of a whirl of atomic energy is just as creative, artistic, as the process by which Patty Hearst turned her father from beloved parent into a pig imperialist. Your whole world has been constructed that way. You are reconciled to death because you have been told all your life that everybody must die. Only the extropian minority, which can be found wherever scientists, science fiction fans, futurists, and space enthusiasts gather, is living in the separate reality that claims we no longer have to accept this axiom of despair. The revolutionaries of any decade will become the reactionaries of the next decade if they do not change their nervous system because the world around them is changing. He or she who stands still in a moving, racing, accelerating age moves backwards, relatively speaking. Thus, there are hundreds of thanatological seminars available in the once revolutionary but now reactionary consciousness movement. These seminars are designed to reconcile people to death and are about as reactionary as seminars circa 1860 designed to reconcile black people to slavery. Only one offshoot of the consciousness movement, the Theta seminars of Leonard Orr, are designed to prepare people for our oncoming immortality. Exercises. Buy a copy of Christian Science Sentinel and read all the faith healings reported that month. Note that each miracle is attributed to the correct teaching as transmitted by Jesus Christ and Mary Baker Eddy. Buy a copy of The Peyote Cult by anthropologist Weston LeBar, which attributes the same effects to autosuggestion. 3. I hope I've been counting these, sorry. 3. Read Brain Mind Bulletin for any recent year and observe that similar healings are reported regularly and attributed to endorphins in the brain. 4. Witnesses have testified that Jim Jones, like a few other professional faith healers, used shills part of the time. A shill being a person who pretends to be ill and pretends to be cured in order to get the audience in the right frame of mind. Reread all the miracles in the New Testament. Using each of these filters, Jesus had the correct teachings. Jesus was using autosuggestion. The sufferers' brains unleashed endorphins when Jesus gave them positive autosuggestion. Jesus was a con man using shills. Since you weren't there at the time, does your choice among these theories, or your combination of them, tell more about Jesus or more about your own favorite reality tunnel? 5. Did you ever really give a good trial to our exercise? I can now exceed all of my previous hopes and ambitions. Try it. And at the same time, try, I can be healthier than I have ever been before. And this has been Chapter 13 of Prometheus Rising. Till next time.